Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, October 21st, 7 p.m. We are in regular session tonight. Our first item of business is to establish a quorum. Two of our council members are unable to be with us, but we do have the quorum. Next item of business is disposition of the minutes for the regular session of City Council held on October 7th, 2019. If I could have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes have been approved. Under communications, I have two items. One of them is a notice that City Council members will be meeting with President Nellis and some of his administrative staff on October 31st, at noon at the OU Inn. And this is part of an annual meeting that we have to discuss various items and see ways in which we might work together. The other item of business is a notice of a public hearing, and this is to consider the recommendation from the Athens Planning Commission to rezone portions of Athens on Court Street from B3 to B2D, and that public hearing will be Monday, November 18th at 7 p.m., so immediately before our council meeting. Are there other communications from council members? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I just wanted to briefly acknowledge that I have been in receipt of a few emails expressing concern about the proposed changes to short-term rentals and that presence in an R1.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Any other communications? We'll move on then to communications and reports from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason. Okay. Mayor Patterson.
I have a couple items tonight, President Isley. First, Council had asked in the committee meeting about the State Route 56 West Union Bridge over the railroad tracks, rather, about whether it was going to be widened or not. And so to report to Council, it's going to be widened by 6 feet. Which will create 2 11-foot wide lanes and 2 4-foot shoulders on this particular bridge project. So it will be significant widening to go up 6 feet. Another question that came from council at the last meeting was about the fire truck. I believe the fire chief provided the information that you're interested in. The truck that we will be receiving is almost the exact same truck, a little bit larger cab than our most recent pumper truck. I wanted to share this with council. This we received from American Bloom. It's American Bloom recognizing the City of Athens for our community vitality in the population category of 22,000 to 30,000 population. It was one of those categories that we scored very high in through American Bloom. And the last thing I want to share with council, this wasn't a written communication, it was a call that I had today from an individual living on Central Avenue, and it was interesting. And it was something that dawned on me last week when the elementary schools did not have class last Friday. And the question was, can something be done on Central Avenue where we have restricted parking during periods when there wasn't classes? This was a one-day class closure because of in-service or whatever it was that was going on. I don't recall. But then I started thinking about things that are longer, like Thanksgiving or during the holiday break in December. And as well, the summer, when there is no classes in place. So that's something that we're working on and looking through to see how we can make some adjustments to the parking restrictions down there on Central Avenue, but in particular when there aren't classes for, again, whether it's parent-teacher conferences or longer periods where they're closed. So we're looking into that just to share with council. It was something that we'd not thought about. And that can happen.
Okay, thank you. We now have ordinances for third reading. The first one is Ordinance 119, an ordinance adopting the Athens County Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan for the City of Athens, and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. At this moment, I would like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 100-19.
Second.
Thank you. Council may recall that I believe in my absence, Councilmember Grace initially presented this in committee, if I recall correctly. And then I believe additionally, City Planner Paul Logue also addressed members of council about this. We do, on your drive, you do have the whereases, and this is a continuation. This is legislation that we've had in the past. And again, I think safety is paramount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval. Do we have any other comments from council members or administration? Comments or questions? Any comments or questions from the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Ordinance 10419 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids where necessary for design of the Columbia Avenue sanitary sewer and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Again, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 104-19.
Second.
Thank you. If you recall, one of the talking points that we addressed regarding this particular legislation is the aging infrastructure of the city of Athens. This is an attempt to move in the right direction and empower the city service safety director to advertise and accept bids to fix the Columbia Avenue sanitary sewer. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 10419. Are there any other comments or questions from council members or administration or the audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Ordinance 10519 is an ordinance amending the 2019 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I make a motion that we adopt 105-19.
Second.
This is one of those appropriations that always comes along about this time of year. We always have expenses. In this case, it's for parking enforcement for IPS services. And interesting, a hefty refund check received from the Bureau of Workmen's Compensation to be deposited back into the city and then reappropriated.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 10519. Any other comments or questions from administrations, council members, or the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 10619 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into or to extend the agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office through December 31st, 2020, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to adopt 10619.
Second.
We have a municipal court. We need public defenders. We share the cost with the county, and this is how we go about doing it.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 10619. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, or audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 10719 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 14218, staffing levels, and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I make a motion that we adopt 107-19.
Second.
Had me worried there for a second. With the Service Safety Director is making some changes with the organization of lands and buildings, and this is part of it, creating a new position of a head landscaper, and he needs council's approval to do that.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10719. Any comments or questions from Council members, administration, or audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance carry. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Excuse me. Ordinance 10819 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 7116, authorizing non-union pay grades and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 108-19.
Second.
Thank you. This is in tandem with the previous ordinance. Now that the position has been created, that we have to create the necessary pay scales, ranges, and grades. So this is what this ordinance does, as we discussed in committee and read before.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10819. Any comments or questions from council, administration, or audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 10919 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to pay the head landscaper and Arts, Parks, and Recreation labor supervisor a rate in accordance with Ordinance 14318, the non-union personnel fringe benefits package, Section 20, promotion, and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I make a motion that we adopt 109-19.
Second.
This is the final ordinance in the creation of the positions. In this case, it deals with the actual fringe benefits and the rate that the supervisor would be paid.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10919. Any comments or questions from council, administration, or audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We have one ordinance for second reading. That is Ordinance 11019. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to provide financial support from the city's transient guest tax to the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, known as ORCA, for funding the Bailey's Trail System, along with other recreational activities. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Okay, and we might, do we see if we have any comments or questions first from council members, and then we'll see if we have any comments from the audience. Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. I would first like to say I'm grateful to Dr. Twilley, I think it is, who was the gentleman who testified before us last week, and he has sent me some very interesting articles about the mountain bike and tourism, and I find it very informative. But I noticed that our director of our tourism bureau is present, and I've had two questions, and I wonder if she could answer them since we seem to be running out of time somewhat on this. The first question is basically, if we're paying $90,000 per year and the trail is not developed in the first year, or I assume it would take some time to develop it, where is that $90,000 coming out of from your budget? And then the second question I have is, based upon these studies that I've been reading, I haven't come across anything that really has any kind of similar funding proposal. It seems that the funding for these other trails has come from private sources like the Waltons in Arkansas or the state in Oregon. I just wondered if you know of any other example where a city has actually done the funding for it.
And Paige, before you begin, and just announcing your name and identifying yourself, just a point of clarification that when council members ask a question of an audience member, and we're oftentimes in the midst of detailed discussion, I don't set the timer for 3 minutes. Okay. But if you can confine it to 3, that would be great, but I'm not going to set the buzzer on you. And that's a little bit different from when persons make an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, and I do set the 3 3-minute timer, or specific comments from individuals like we had with the trash renewal of the trash contract. So that kind of situation, I do set the timer. But thank you, Paige, for being here.
My staff will now think they can set a 3-minute timer on me at the office. I see exactly where this is going. Well, let me answer your second question first.
Okay.
Yes, so if you look at the trail system that was developed in Northwest Arkansas, in Bentonville, it was paid for by the Walton family. It's gone on over the course of about 10 years, and they've invested all in all of their bike tourism, not just their mountain bike trails, about a little over $70 million. Okay, and that includes about a 35 to 37 mile paved bikeway. I think they have 5 mountain bike trails, and then some other biking systems, pump tracks, and learning courses kind of wrapped into that. So it's a huge system that I think goes across 6 or 7 counties. It's quite large.
Right.
I would encourage you to take a look at the Cuyuna Lakes, Minnesota project. That there's no project like this one. There's no project that's been directly funded by a municipality or a county that I've been able to find. However, the Minnesota Department of Parks, and I guess what would be their equivalent to ODNR, did invest in 2017 in the park system for them to be able to extend their mileage through, I think, completion in the year 2025. And it was about $4.1 million was what came in state aid for that. That local bike club raised $1 million on their own in order to actually begin the trail. So their total contribution is about $5.1 million. Now, don't quote me exactly on that, but there are some good articles out. Now, I've not been able to find a true economic impact study on Cuyuna Lakes like we've been able to find on some of the other trails that exist out there. The Bentonville Trail is probably one of the hallmarks because it does have so much information in it. The Virginia Creeper Trail is also a really great trail to look at. I would encourage you, when you look at these studies, to understand what they're measuring versus what we're measuring. Because some of the trail studies, some of the impact studies will measure a paved bikeway, a mountain bike trail system. They're permitted in a state park or a recreation area. They have additional things attached to them that make them multi-use and perhaps used 12 months out of the year. So make sure that when you read that you're not just looking at what the user numbers are or the visitor numbers, but that you understand what they're actually measuring the impact of. To answer your first question, the way that the bed tax is set up with the Visitors Bureau in the City of Athens, we receive 50% of the transient guest tax. The city retains 50% of that bed tax for their general fund. And so it's my understanding that this payment, this $90,000, will be coming out of what the TGT amount is, that is the cities, that goes into their general fund. I can give you kind of a general idea of that right now. It's about $214,000 that we receive, which means that the 50% for the city is about $214,000.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Thank you, Paige, for sharing with us. This is more so a comment directed to council, but does acknowledge one of your talking points, which was the Minnesota project. Council should be in receipt of an article I forwarded them from Outside Magazine, which references the Cuyuna Lake mountain biking crew and their projects there. It looks like, according to a survey and data conducted by them, of the mountain biking club and the IMBA, 25,000 cyclists a year ride the trails, adding an estimated $2 million to the local economy. That same survey predicts that the number will increase to 21 million once the trails are expanded to the planned 75-mile trail, which would be comparable to what we're looking at Bailey's. Does that sound accurate? as far as length of trail and...
What I could not find in their study was, in their master plan, they supposedly had this impact study that would show the increase from where they go from 25 miles to 75 miles. So I have no idea how they got to that number. I have a general idea. I'm pretty good at tourism math, but without seeing it on paper, I'd hate to tell you exactly how they came by that. So.
But according to their data, the guess is that they will see continued economic positive impact. I did want to also acknowledge that present this evening in the audience is CEO of Rural Action, Debbie Phillips, who also spoke at first reading, I believe, or was it committee? At committee, thank you. So she is here present this evening. If there's any other questions that we may want to ask of her, she did speak about some of the other partnership opportunities that Rural Action would be able to participate in with regards to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McGee?
I have one other question. It occurred to me that I believe this was answered by the head ranger when she was here last time, but I just wondered for clarification, if by any chance the city and county did not fund this and it were kind of put back into your hands or the hands of private funding, I was trying to think what she said, how long it would take as far as a delay to actually get it funded, because the statement was made it's going to happen, which I agree it's a great thing. I mean, I'm not contesting that, and I hope it does happen. But I just wondered, as far as that delay, what kind of a delay would you anticipate?
I don't think I can answer and tell you what the delay would be. I think it's probably the difference in the number of miles that we're able to complete with the funding we have now versus the total 88 miles that we'd like to have the funding for to just do right away. So it's the difference. And I would guess maybe being able to complete 40 to 50 miles versus being able to complete 88 miles. Dawn would probably have a better idea based on the funding that they have in place right now, how many miles that would complete for them versus what this last round of funding would provide as far as mileage.
I think, Debbie, would you have that information?
Some.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Phillips.
Thanks. Debbie Phillips, CEO of Rural Action. So I can't speak for Dawn or the Wayne, but what I can tell you is that the financing that the large collaboration is putting together for the construction is looking at several different pots of money and some timelines in order to work on the new markets tax credit. So Seth did a presentation when he was here about the structure of the overall deal and the investment from the local units of government into that, in addition to the funding from the Office of Surface Mining, through the pilot program that's already in place and some of the private philanthropy that has, and grants that have already been made, that constitutes the package overall, and there is a timeline for that. So if the complete package doesn't come forward, I don't know what that does to the overall deal that's being structured for those new markets tax credits. So again, I'm not really engaged in the construction side of it with the work that we're doing. We're more involved on the economic development opportunity, but I do know that that very complex deal has a lot of moving parts, and the local funding is part of that kind of the overall package working.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have Councilmember Crowell and then the mayor.
Mrs. Phillips, if you could stay, I have another question for you. About the economic development that Rural Action is doing, I was approached by a citizen who was perhaps concerned about maybe the other side of this issue, which is that it is wildly successful and Chauncey undergoes huge property increases near the park and the trail system and gentrification, et cetera. So is Rural Action working on those issues at all in terms of what will happen to the village of Chauncey?
So we, when I came to speak with you before, we didn't have the public information about the ARC Power Grant, which has now been announced, and we are really excited to be part of a large collaboration involving local organizations that work in the space of cultural tourism, outdoor recreation, the marketing overall, and business support. So our role in that work is to work with the communities at the trailheads, to work with local people to stand up their own economic opportunities. So I believe that the trail will have an economic impact, and absent an intentional focus of working with the people in the communities, someone else may come in and buy up property and create, B&Bs and cabins and restaurants and coffee shops and all the various amenities that could surround the trailhead. But our focus and our concern is working with the people who live there so they have those opportunities. We're really eager to do that work. The Office of Surface Mining pilot funds are there to do the construction at the main trailhead in Chansey so that there's going to be a better restroom and parking and amenities that make it easy for folks to access that location. So I think there's a great opportunity for the people who live there. But I share that concern. I know that that has happened in some places. I heard a story recently that was talking about Airbnb and the impact in the French Quarter in New Orleans, where a lot of the local folks have been priced out of their homes because there's such a tremendous pressure with Airbnbs. I don't think this is going to be that level of tourism, but we are mindful of the fact that it's a double-edged sword sometimes. So we really do want to work with local people to try to develop and support them in doing their own business plans.
Is there anything that's happening now? I mean, I believe there are speculators who are purchasing properties near the trailhead as we speak. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that's going on with the citizens of Chansey?
There have been some initial public meetings that were held. The Wayne coordinated some meetings with local citizens to go look at the park in Chansey and talk about the kind of amenities that local people want to see at the trailhead. And I believe that the Athens County Foundation and the Innovation Center, and I don't know if Convention and Visitors Bureau was involved in an early workshop that was held to try to surface ideas that people had about businesses. But we are really just ramping up with our role in this. There have been some initial efforts, but we are going to be doing a lot more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Patterson.
One of the things that Don McCarthy did mention, the question came up about timeline and differences in the timelines. Under trying to find grants and go through the whole grant cycle process, she was stating that it could take 7 to 10 years, so a longer build out to have the trails completed versus something like the pay for success model, which one allows for much more quick build out for the trails. So therefore, municipalities in the county can realize the impact of something like that sooner than something taking 7 to 10 years to build out. The other thing I want to share with council is that the state treasurer, Robert Sprague, has come out and said that the pay for success models of funding, the state recognizes those as a viable way to fund projects, not specifically for, say, Quantified Ventures, who's been working with the Bailey, but the whole concept of pay for success models. So I just wanted to make council aware of that even at the state level they recognize it. And one of the things that we will continue to do as we go through this, granted council approving it, is we will still sit there and look at ways we can apply for other grant funding to help pay for our portion of the Bailey Trail system.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thanks for being here tonight to answer our questions, both of you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, from the audience. Mr. Swearingen. Okay.
Does anyone have the ability to plug a USB drive in and go to an Excel spreadsheet file?
I would say that what we can do is do that on the third reading. Can you still make your comments tonight for us?
I can, and this would support them.
I don't know that we can get it up without advance notice. We can. Scott's saying no. Okay, that's our government channel. I appreciate. And what we will try and do, we can share this information then for the Excel spreadsheet. If you don't mind us having access to it, we'll share it with council members.
We've been here in more time and fashion, except for the traffic jam on Court in
I know, it's a mess.
Washington.
Yep.
You've got a full house in the parking garage.
Yep.
No kidding.
Save for where it's cordoned off. You could have made an extra, couple $100 tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to set the
3
timer
minutes?
for you, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Not to contradict anything that anybody has done relative to this trail up to this point in time, my comments revolve solely around what hasn't been done, which means there's room for improvement. And I think based upon the sentiments of this community, valid reason for improvement. So Bailey's is a perfectly smashing proposal with potentially astounding positive impacts. We all agree. Unfortunately, a carbon offset component appears to be absent. It's not to say that nobody's talked about it in the past, but nobody seems to know to what degree, and it hasn't developed in the final game plan. In this way, it hasn't been presented to the public. Council is being asked to authorize the city's financial commitment to this project, apparently in the absence of carbon offset. Several trial balloons have been flown as to why it's not that big of a deal. Well, one, it's a bicycle trail. We all know bicycles are green. They don't contribute to carbon footprint? Surely not. Well, people... You've seen the bumper sticker, I ride my bike to ride my bike, as opposed to I put my bike on a bike rack and travel 30 miles. So there is a carbon footprint from vehicular traffic, and nobody knows what that's going to be. Nobody knows what the professional enthusiast contribution is going to be. Nobody knows what, out of the 181 million visitors, what the local contribution is going to be. And out of an 88-mile trail, how many of those are going to have to travel 15 miles one way and 15 miles back, and how does that equate to fuel and carbon dioxide? Second argument might be visitors would go somewhere else if Bailey's isn't here. Now, since nobody can be in two places at one time, then theoretically if they were there, they would have a carbon footprint. If they were here at Bailey's, they would have a carbon footprint. So therefore, it's a behavioral carbon wash. So we don't consider their contribution for that reason. 3 would be visitors will incorporate Bailey's somewhere in the front, middle, or the existing travel itinerary. So let's say they're going to Columbus, they stop in at Bailey's. Let's say that they're going to Parkersburg, and then they extend their trip to Bailey's. That's the furthest point of a linear travel path. That mileage would be a carbon footprint. Let's say they had a linear travel path, and they put Bailey's on the ticket, and they create a circular travel path. That increases mileage by increasing that portion of the sphere, or the circle, increasing carbon footprint. But the majority of visitors will be local. Well, we still have people that ride our present trail, and they drive their car and carry their bike to where they're going to ride their bike. So they have a carbon footprint. So plain, pure, and simple, bicycling is not immune to carbon debt, whether it be a city trail, Bailey's trail, any trail. And carbon debt has not been calculated into this scenario to the best that I've been able to discern talking to several people that are further up the food chain than I would ever anticipate being. So, in absence of a carbon debt offset mechanism, 4 questions, and probably more, arise. Will City Council take pause and draw attention to this omission? 2, will sufficient carbon offset mechanisms surface and planners make a commitment to include carbon offset as a component of Bailey's? I'm really close to the end.
Okay. Read fast. 3, will City Council commit the City of Athens financially when no carbon offset mechanism is included, hoping for the best rather than planning for the best? Or 4, does City Council, as perhaps do many others, consider the carbon debt of Bailey's to be inconsequential? Bailey's could be a premier green destination, truly, from stem to stern. Both in reality and perception, were carbon offset a signature mark of its development. Without carbon offset, it falls considerably short. While City Council can't change what is, perhaps it can lend the change to what will be. 2 other aspects are worthy of mention regarding how this may or may not be addressed. 1, while it's currently deer season across the country, yabbits are always in season, meaning yabbit this, yabbit that. And there is no bag limit on yabbits. So there'll be constant yabbits on why this can't be done. And 2, and this is the caveat or the end, in the vein of Grover Norquist, who probably wouldn't attempt to abolish Bailey's or entirely deny its carbon footprint, the tendency will be to massage perception of Bailey's carbon debt, to quote unquote, and to paraphrase, to where it can be dragged into the bathroom and drowned in the bathtub. While that makes sense relative to calculating the cost of offsetting Bailey's carbon debt, the question then becomes, what is the size of that carbon debt, and how would City Council propose to dispose of the body? Thank you for the comments. And we'll check for the Excel spreadsheet. Yes. I'm sorry.
I had come prepared to speak to you.
Had you? Okay. So you're on your 3-minute?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there we go. All right. Come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for...
So thanks for the questions that you asked. I did just want to share a little bit more context. So we are very excited about this, and I think the Appalachian Regional Commission and the Governor's Office of Appalachia also see great promise in cultural tourism, outdoor recreation, and ways that we can help to diversify the economy of our region through these kind of projects. I know that John Kerry is very interested in each county in the Appalachian region developing trails so that we can really try to brand the region as a place that folks can come and really have some quality time and adventures and explore the region. We have a lot to offer here. So we're excited to be able to be part of an effort to help diversify the local economy. And I would also just add, for a little bit of historical perspective, my understanding is that when people in the local community were concerned about the prospect of potential drilling or logging on the Wayne National Forest, the former Wayne National Forest Supervisor, Tony Scardina, said, bring me some ideas of other kinds of economic activity that can happen around the Wayne National Forest and this tremendous asset that we have in our region. So this proposal itself is in response to our community's interest in developing a more diverse local economy that isn't based just in those boom and bust economic cycles. And I also think that there is increasing interest in looking at the ecosystem services provided by trees. And there have been recent reevaluations of past assumptions that existing trees were more like carbon neutral. There's recognition about the tremendous value that older standing trees have in helping to mitigate carbon impacts. So if it's a question that Council is interested in exploring, I think the scientific thinking and understanding around carbon impacts is really evolving and is it's worth talking about, but there is tremendous value in us finding ways to develop opportunity around the assets that we have that also have these great ecological benefits. So I'm just delighted that we're having this public conversation and to have the opportunity to be a part of this very large collaboration in our community. So thanks for your part in this discussion.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thanks for the discussion and questions. We'll move on now to ordinances for first reading. 11119 is an ordinance to repeal and replace Athens City Code Title 35, Cable Communications, and is introduced by Councilmember Fall. And do we have somebody else explaining that? Councilmember Reisner, if you would.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the first reading of this ordinance. Present my limited knowledge on it. Essentially, the city code has to be brought in line with that of the ORC, the Ohio Revised Code. And on our Google Drive, there's the ordinance with 2 pages of whereases and finally a be it ordained on the 3rd page. All this is necessary in order to repeal or replace our Title 25, which deals with cable communications, with the new pertinent code of the ORC. So, to cut to the chase, I'll read this part. Whereas in order to enable the city to meet the VSPs appropriately and adequately and properly address all the requirements and conditions of the ORC sections 1332.21 through 1332.34, the city believes it's necessary to repeal Title 25 of the codified ordinance of the City of Athens and replace Title 35 with the language provided herein. And there's an attachment, and be it ordained by the City Council, Athens State. So,
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members, administration, or audience? Okay.
Mayor.
Just as a
Yes.
brief reminder to everybody, again, this is us having to respond to a preemption attack on home rule, with being able to manage our own cable access, as well as the fees associated with them.
Thank you. Ordinance 11219 is an ordinance authorizing amending Ordinance 118, construction and construction engineering services for the Richmond Bridge over Coates Run. This is Project 321. And I believe it's introduced by Councilmember Katsas, and Councilmember Crowell will be speaking to this tonight.
Thank you, President Isley. This is adding funds to the bridge over Coates Run at Richmond Avenue near the entrance to the summit. But City Engineer Bob Hetty gave us the good news today that this will not cost the city any additional money, that ODOT will cover the additional money that's needed to finish this project. So I'll just read the pertinent section. Section 1, the 2019 Appropriation Ordinance 0-140-19 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $166,250 to Small Cities ODOT Fund 589, transaction code 500, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or comments from council, administration, or audience?
That's good.
Ordinance 11319 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA state project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for a bridge repair project within the corporation boundary on State Route 56. This is PID 99578, and declaring an emergency. And Councilmember Crowell will speak to this tonight.
Thank you, President Isley. Member Katsas left me with two fairly easy ones, and I thank him for that. This is the standard authorization for ODOT to do work within the city limits, and it will cost nothing to the city. The mayor brought this up in communications at the beginning of tonight's meeting, indicating that this is actually an improvement and a widening of the bridge on State Route 56, just past Kenny Drive, near the UPS, before Morrison Gordon Elementary. So this is just an authorization allowing ODOT to come in and do that work on that bridge. Thank you, President.
Okay, Councilmember Reisner. Yes.
Since the mayor gave us the news about the widening, is there going to be any type of physical barrier between, say, pedestrians trying to cross the bridge and traffic like we have on our Richland Avenue over the Channel Bridge?
I don't know that I completely understand what your question is.
Okay.
Having barriers to where people can't cross over the bridge on foot?
Or where a car couldn't strike them?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. It's just going to be a widening of the shoulder.
Okay. So get on the bridge and run for it.
Or ride really fast if you're on a bicycle.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I did want to acknowledge thanks to the mayor for sharing with us about the widening. I think I'd also heard about that from the fire chief, who was aware of that for his safety reasons. My guess too maybe is perhaps Councilmember Reisner's acknowledging that in the past we have had pedestrians heading out that way to events such as I believe the venue for Numbers Fest. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Widening it, I think, will make it safer, which I think is a step in the right direction. As a motorcyclist and a bicycle rider, I do know that can be a precarious crossing. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Move on to Ordinance 11419. And this is an ordinance repealing Ordinance 2519, amending Athens City Code Title 17, Chapter 17.01, Municipal Income Tax, to add Section 17.01.066, election to be subject to Ohio Revised Code, Section 7.18 718.80 through 718.95 and replacing it to incorporate the Ohio Revised Code sections by reference. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Your reading of the title pretty much summarizes everything that this ordinance is about. The Section 1 then goes into various paragraphs and so on, but essentially this is another example, as the mayor was pointing out, where the state of Ohio was telling us how we should set up our city codes. So our choices are either do it or we're no longer in compliance with our taxes. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members, administration, or audience? Okay. Ordinance 11519 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 17, Chapter 17.01, Municipal Income Tax, Section 17.01.03, Definitions, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Sort of the same situation again. I just want to point out to members of council that the copy that they have on their Google Drive is not the completed copy, which I have. The difference between the copy that the ordinance that is being read tonight for the first time and the one that you may be seeing on your Google Drive is in Section 1, and the words effective January 1st, 2020 should be at the beginning of that sentence. So we have a typographical error there, but this reading shall take care of it.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to Ordinance 11619. This is an ordinance amending the 2019 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm on deck a lot tonight. Let's see. This one I'm going to have to read because it is an appropriation. Section 1, the 2019 Appropriation Ordinance 140-18 is hereby amended by appropriating from the following from the unappropriated balance: $10,000 to Recreation Fund 270 Transaction Code 100 for year-end personnel services, and $360,000 to Medical Fund 866 Transaction Code 300 to provide for medical claims through year-end and increasing the total appropriations by said amount.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. I believe you read Section 1 to be for personnel services, but I believe it says personal services.
You're correct. I'm sorry, I misspoke, and I'm glad you're on the ball.
I did have a question, though, concerning that. What are those services that are being compensated from that particular fund?
I'll toss that to the mayor.
Salary.
Well, I realize it's salaries, but I mean, is it an increase in salaries of somebody or additional people being brought on?
I can check on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any discussion about increase of salaries to anyone there, so.
But I'll follow up and get that information for you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Ordinance 11719 is an ordinance authorizing the auditor to reduce 2019 year-end appropriations. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1, the auditor is hereby authorized to reduce the 2019 appropriations where anticipated receipts are not adequate and when combined with the carry forward balance not sufficient to approve the full appropriation of funds. This is our yearly, near the end of the year, housekeeping for the budget that we passed back in January last year.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? All right. Ordinance 11819 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with Finley Fire Equipment Company to purchase a fire pumper truck and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is where I get to wear my fireman's hat.
Cheers.
The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into contract with Findlay Fire Company Incorporated to purchase a fire pumper truck. Section 2, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $750,000 from Capital Improvements Fund 580, Transaction Code 500, for said purchase. The reason that we're moving on this now is it takes up to 10 months from the time that the order is actually made to the delivery. So it's important that we start the process now if we want to take delivery sometime at the end of next year.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I will acknowledge briefly again my gratitude to Ohio University for their past support in assisting the city to purchase fire trucks. My understanding, if memory serves me correctly, they've assisted us in the purchase of 2 trucks, our ladder truck and the previous truck prior to this one. That's a big deal, and it's a significant amount of money that they've assisted over the years. We have a symbiotic relationship in this community. The university does not provide a fire department. They do provide a police department. I'm also thankful that Mayor Patterson continues to meet on a regular basis with President Nellis to communicate these needs as well as other efforts for us to continue to work collaboratively together. So thank you, and thank you, President Nellis, for that. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments or questions from council members, staff, administration, or audience? Okay. Ordinance 11919 is an ordinance authorizing disposal of a 1997 fire pumper truck no longer needed for a municipal purpose. And that's introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Again, this is first reading, and there's an opportunity for us to properly dispose of a 1997 fire pumper truck. The particular truck that we're discussing has 66,000 miles on it. We are able to dispose through this ordinance by empowering the Service Safety Director through auction, sealed bid, or trade-in, which would then be beneficial to the community, obviously, in the public dollar. Let me offer a little bit of data regarding this particular truck. If I'm looking at information from the chief correctly, in 1997, there were approximately 564 fire runs that were performed within that department. In 2018, that has, give or take, doubled to over 1,000. That is a lot of wear and tear on our equipment and our vehicles. As we know, and speaking with our loved ones or parents or family members, when you go to purchase a vehicle, we know that highway miles are a lot easier on a vehicle than city miles. These are all city miles. That's a lot of starting and stopping. That's wear and tear on transmissions and brakes and suspension equipment. Thank you.
Thanks for that information. Okay, any questions or comments from council members, administration? Yes, Councilmember McGee.
Just one question for Councilman Butler. I just wondered whether you had any statistics that would show how many actual fires there were or how many false alarms. And I know the run usually includes uptown where there's an alarm that's gone off, and I know that would probably skew the statistics somewhat, but I just wondered whether you had that by any chance.
I may not be able to provide that with this particular bit of data I have on me, Councilmember McGee. I do believe we could probably access that from the chief. I do know that there has been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 incidences with loss of over $4,000 or greater within that time period.
And we do in our council offices have the fire department's annual report, and at the very back, I think it's the last page, has the graph on the percentage
does that have on
of
the
false
truck?
alarms, and also divides between the percentage of runs that go to the city as opposed to the university. The
Like to
vast
see that,
number
yeah.
of them being to the university. Yeah. So we could get that information. Yeah, Mayor Patterson?
I can get to a ratio for the false alarms versus actual fires and responses. And within those actual fires, things like burnt popcorn may qualify within that, to actual structure fire. So I can ask Chief Reimer to put something together for you if you'd like to see it in that way, to where you're looking at a ratio between.
Well, I think it might be relevant if the question comes up in the coming year as far as relocating any fire department as to what actual need there is and where the need is centered and where the runs are. And so I would appreciate knowing that.
I'd ask council to keep in mind that, aside from false alarms or actual structure fires, they're responding to automobile crashes, they're responding to elevator entrapments. I mean, there's a lot that the fire department, 2016, they were responding to a cat stuck in a tree. So they will respond in a multitude of ways.
Drownings.
Drownings.
Councilmember Reisner?
Well, in terms of engine wear and time on the vehicle, what difference does it make if it's a false alarm or a fire? I mean, the truck still moves, right?
It doesn't.
So
They're responding.
I really don't. I guess I don't understand your reasoning.
I think Councilmember McGee was making in reference to future discussion about another topic that's possibly another fire station, or a fire station at a different location. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We're ready to move on to
be so
resolution.
confused.
Third reading. Yes. Did you have one more?
Just one thing to point out to council, if you notice the means by which we're asking for disposal, as is typical in the past, we'll have things that are in here, dispose of the truck through auction, sealed bids, or trade-in, or donation. We've removed that. The appraised value of the truck from Pierce, who is one of the fire truck manufacturers, was $13,000 for a trade-in value. But we plan to put it out at sealed bid. We were fortunate with one of our more recent fire pumper truck disposals that we ended up getting, I believe it was a little more than $30,000 under sealed bid. So we will go that route again, as opposed to donate the truck to another municipality.
That sounds
Thank you.
good.
We now have a resolution for third
you, Mayor.
reading. R919, a resolution accepting the petitions and articles of incorporation of the Athens Uptown Special Improvement District, known as a SID, declaring it necessary to improve certain areas of Uptown Athens and declaring an emergency. And this resolution was brought forward by Councilmember Fall. And so we now have the third reading that would be for approval tonight. Correct? Councilmember Reisner, would you like to move that forward then for
Well, I
approval?
can move that we approve, or what do we say with resolutions?
Make a motion.
Say-
Make a motion.
to approve.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay,
By
making-
Councilmember Reisner. How's that?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can you wash my car?
Perhaps later.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of Resolution 919 that was discussed in committee last week. This is a special improvement district in the Uptown area. Any comments or questions before we take the vote? Councilmember McGee?
This is not criticism at all, but I do think it's important for us all to understand that the city is actually a partner in this SID development, and that the city will be paying some funds into this as well. And my understanding is the SID itself will then determine how those funds will be used. So, and it seems like a really interesting idea, and I hope it works well in Athens. So, thank you.
Okay. Mayor Patterson? Oh, Councilmember Butler, and then Mayor Patterson.
And actually, this will be a segue. If council recalls, and we do have audience members, many audience members present this evening, I believe the mayor has shared with us other successful SIDs from other communities. I believe Lancaster, am I correct in remembering that?
That's correct.
Thank you. which for those of us in Southeast Ohio that have visited Lancaster over the years, it is an improvement, and beautification has taken place there, and it's obvious to me what some of those changes are. I could only see this as being potentially positive, and it's having a good impact for us within Athens. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Patterson.
Basically said everything I was going to say. Is that,
He's on a roll.
for those, well, it's good. So thank you. For those of us who do remember what downtown Lancaster looked like 15 years ago, and then they decided to take on, go down the special improvement district route. A lot of what you see in downtown Lancaster now in the old portion of the town off Main Street is largely because of the special improvement district and the way it has really changed the look and feel of Lancaster. Columbus has 5 of them. Short North has a special improvement district, as does what's called Capitol Crossroads. So a lot of the things you see in downtown Columbus, is because of their efforts with their special improvement district. And one of the things that's unique about Columbus's, but then again, it also brings in a lot of money, is that they are able to hire staff such as social workers who will help people who are homeless living on the streets to get the services that they need. So SIDs are really fascinating tools that can help any municipality improve kind of the look and feel of whatever becomes scoped out as the district that you're creating.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. Would one example potentially be a bump out or an extension of the sidewalk so that the distance crossing a crosswalk would become shorter or more accessible for people with disabilities as well as the elderly or young? Is that sort of like one example potentially?
They could.
Potentially.
Or it could be a partnership with the city, especially when we're looking at things like the Transportation Alternative Program grant through ODOT, which we were lucky to receive for 2023 to redo State Street in between Congress and College, and so you can that SID money, based upon what the census is for those who are members of the SID, it could be used for revenue to come in to support other grants.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and second for approval of Resolution 919. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the resolution is adopted or approved. We now have announcements and other business. The first one being a motion to accept the auditor's September 2019 financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. That motion carries. And then a motion, please, to accept the September 2019 credit card transactions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Thank you. We do have tonight an appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals that the mayor is recommending. And Councilmember Grace, would you be willing to
Sure.
introduce this and make the motion for the approval?
Yes, I would make a motion that we approve the mayor's appointment of Robert DeLocke to the BZA. And council members have before us his resume, and he has spoken before this body numerous occasions and has in a relatively short time in Athens been very active and engaged with the community, coming to many committee, commission, and other meetings, both city and university. So I, yes. So
Make a motion?
Make a
for approval?
motion.
A second, please?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second for Mr. DeLocke to be appointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, thank you, and thank Mr. DeLocke for his service. Do we have any other announcements that we need to make? I know we'll be in committee next week, and I'll assume finance and personnel, likely, okay. And we'll see if others can get the notice to Clerk of Council Debbie Walker by Wednesday. That would be a help. And we now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that have not been covered on the agenda. So if something has not been mentioned tonight or spoken to, or a resolution or ordinance read, you're welcome to come up. And we'll set the timer for 3 minutes. And Mr. Stouffer, do I understand that you have your statement, but perhaps somebody else's?
This is a statement from another citizen who asked me to read it into the record.
Okay.
Jack Stauffer, Elmwood Place. I was contacted by Joan and Steve Saffron from 36 Utah Place about their concerns and past experiences. They've asked me to read this into the public record for them. It is well written, and I will do my best to convey it properly. Statement from Joan and Steve Saffron, 36 Utah Place, Athens, Ohio. We regret that we are unable to be at the meeting to voice our significant concerns with resolution number R0819 regarding short-term rentals in R1 neighborhoods. We have therefore asked to have this statement read and included in the minutes. Currently, with approximately 75% of Athens City functioning as rentals, predominantly to students, family and permanent resident areas are far less common than in other communities. Athens is a small, progressive, tight-knit city that encourages diversity. However, it is essential to preserve some neighborhoods as a peaceful residential community for more permanent residents. We believe this resolution is moving along too quickly, without enough time to allow permanent residents a chance to reflect and comment. As has been demonstrated around the world, entire communities that were once made up of permanent residents have evolved into transient Airbnb tourist hotels. Our concern is that the tourist homes / Airbnbs / VRBOs, whatever they are called, will be full of happy, noisy partiers during the important OU weekends. These short-term guests have no stake in preserving good community relations. We chose our neighborhood on the Far East Side to avoid being in the midst of the party, but to have the benefits of being in town. Please don't bring the party to us. We have already experienced issues in our neighborhood with illegal, loud events that go on well into the night. This has led to issues with the code office and city prosecutor. Despite pursuing these legal avenues, these problems continue regularly and are a source of friction between neighbors. The city police have enough to do. Don't expand their jobs unnecessarily to answer calls about excessive noise and property damage. And however charitable nonprofit organizations might be, they should not be exempt from regulations in our few remaining residential neighborhoods. Nonprofits also pursue funds through rentals and often do not or are unable to properly monitor disorderly events. If this resolution is passed and you allow short-term rentals in the R1 neighborhoods, we expect more noise and friction between neighbors, resulting in driving more regular people out. Zoning exists for a reason. Please respect that reason and preserve the few residential areas we have left. We love our community, pay taxes, support levies that do not directly benefit us. In short, we support our city and community. If the resolution is passed, we will lose much of what makes Athens a wonderful place to live. Respectfully submitted, Joan and Steve Saffron.
Thank you. And do we have anybody else who wants to make a comment? Yes, Mr. Stouffer.
I'd like to follow up on the Saffron's comment with some thoughts of my own. Let me first note that the application that was denied for 42 Utah Place on March 7th, 2019, that they state, that is Anna and Dave Beebe. It appears they must live in Fort Myers, Florida from their address. Which brings me back to a point I made at the last meeting. 51% residency is impossible to monitor and or enforce. They also say in their application there would be an age requirement on site. This would be prejudicial as per your comprehensive plan, which clearly states age cannot be discriminated against and other forms of discrimination. This is an example of just how fast you can lose a quiet neighborhood. If this ordinance passes, these folks at 42 Utah are going to get an opportunity to be in business, and then the Saffrons will have people on both sides of them making noise. As you can plainly already see, this legislation which is proposed, is passed, would immediately make the Far East Side a less desirable place to live, as the Saffrons would have a business on both sides of their house. This same scenario could play out in many areas of our R1 zones, but especially in the close neighborhoods, Near East Side and Far East Side. I note that 30 Utah has hired an out-of-town attorney as well as a local attorney to promote their position. There's an elephant in the room. If your desire is to make legal a clearly illegal business, you will tear at the heart of the fabric of our entire community. As I have previously stated, if this demand is out there, or in the future, surely all the B zones, the R3 zones, and the R2 zones could meet the public demand. Again, I note reluctantly, maybe R1 on the major streets as they pass through, but again, very reluctantly, it is R1. Now let me quote Chris Fall from the Athens Messenger, October 19th, 2016. The headline is, Athens Council adopts bed and breakfast regulations. The Planning Commission is looking at R1 and R2 right now, she said. I would suggest to the Planning Commission that they maybe do an ad hoc committee to get all the stakeholders together to discuss this. We will work through this.
You are at your 3 minutes, so if
Okay,
you can close.
I'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will work through this so that people have their property rights and people have the conditions that they moved into in their neighborhoods with all respected and protected. I got this through a public records request, and I'm sure if you guys want a copy of it, I can get it for you. The administration can provide it. Seems something has changed, and trying to connect the dots, it looks like likely case that this movement may, could, or likely was spurred by the folks at 30 Utah. As the Saffrons so politely stated in their letter, and however charitable these nonprofits are, they should not be exempt from our regulations. Let me note that nonprofits are businesses too, with all the same consequences that for-profit folks create. They still create noise, parking problems, traffic issues, litter, etc. I too am giving 30 Utah the benefit of the doubt that they have good intentions, but should be given no preference because they have the money and clout to try to have zoning changed for their cause, as worthy as it may be. Folks, please use your common sense. It is your job to protect us, not diminish our rights, property rights. We all love this town. Let's think this through and use logic and common sense and make the best decision for all citizens, not the few who wish to profit in our R1 zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other persons wishing to make comment tonight? Okay. Pardon me?
The same or others? Same subject or other subject?
You can, any subject that is not on the agenda, so that would be acceptable if you wanted to also comment. And we'll,
Stephanie Goldsberry, 20 North May, Athens, Ohio.
sorry.
And that's not 3 minutes yet, I know that.
3 minutes you ever had, I know.
I'm not up here to talk about the bed and breakfast and all that today, but I do think the city needs to slow down. And they know my opinion, I've already said it, and I also emphasize parking. I even casually talked to a neighbor this evening who said, well, we won't want it on our street because there isn't any extra parking. So that's an R1. So that's all I'll say about that. My other one goes back, and also I want to commend you on the fire truck. I'm glad to hear the university helps in that way, since they don't do other things, and we all know that the fire trucks go there a lot. Okay, that's done. All right, I'm talking about Cable Lane, which I'm sure you all have heard about before. I've never talked to you about it before, but I live right near it at the corner of North May, Cable Lane, and Woodside. We watch people fly through that stop sign all the time. I have approached the mayor. I have approached several people, and so has Lois Gehrig many times over the years. It's a very dangerous road, as you all know. Right now, it's delightful because of all the construction that's being done on it. There are no running through the sign now. And I'd like to see something to prevent it starting after that construction's done. The mayor told me one time, well, maybe we could put the same kind of barrier we did down at Morris by the school. And I said, do it. And people know I'm not very patient. And I have tried, and I have fought, and I have talked to neighbors, and you're going to get all the cable laners down here one of these days, and they're going to say, do something before we have a death. There's kids at the bottom of Cable Lane. It is a serious situation, and you can't just come up there and put a 25-mile-an-hour sign. You can't come up there and try to just observe. You're going to have to get somewhere where they don't see you. Because I'll stand in my driveway, and they usually stop. And if they don't, they hear from me. And they'll continue to hear from me. And some saying, well, Stephanie, you might not want to do that. They might pull a gun on you. But, you know, seriously, it's a dangerous road, and you've heard that before. I want something done before there's a serious accident. That's a walking area, dog walkers, older people, you name it. And nothing's being addressed to it. I asked for the little yellow things you put down on North May. I said, give it a try. And I heard it might happen, and then dead. Then I heard it was a moratorium on it. Well, go to a memorial for our death someday. And that's all I got to say about Cable Lane, but you will hear more from Cable Lane members and North May, because something's got to be done. Any comment from the
Thanks for coming.
powers that be?
It's a comment time for you, and we don't offer answers or discussion
But,
at this
okay.
opportunity time. But
Perhaps somebody can
duly
answer
noted.
me, because I do try to call and email, but so much patience is just so much patience.
Duly noted. Thanks for being here,
Thank
Stephanie.
you.
Okay. All right. If no other announcements, and no other comments from audience members, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at approximately 8:18 p.m.
Okay. Thank you very much. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Adjourned.